Johnversations Podcast. This is episode number 27. My guest today is an extreme cleaning specialist and the owner of Steri-clean Incorporated. However, you may know him from the A&E hit TV show Hoarders, which has just started its 11th season. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Cory Chalmers. Cory, thank you so much for being here, man. I really do appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. I know, I know kind of talking before, I'm sure you've got a ton of things on your plate. I know you're doing like COVID extreme cleaning for businesses and stuff like that. So I just, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time and being able to sit down and hang out.
You bet.
So, before we kind of jump into what I wanted to talk about, I did want to ask you, with the whole country being in quarantine and then, things reopen, and then obviously you run a business where your job is you go in and you do, extreme crazy cleaning. Like, how has everything been for you? Is the family okay? You guys doing okay with everything that's going on?
Yeah, it has been crazy. It really has. There's just been, we'll get slammed with calls like in the beginning in March. It was insane. March and April, even part of May. It was just crazy. People were so scared, didn't know anything about this thing yet. So that's when we couldn't keep up with the calls and we couldn't keep up with the work we had to do because we were writing, like actual contracts with people. Or just service level things where they said, if someone does come into our work and they're affected, what do we do? So we'd have to write up whole business plans for them just dealing with COVID. So it was something like we had never faced before, but it's slowed down now, definitely. Now we're kind of feeling out, are people going to want us back in their homes to do things like hoarding and the normal stuff that we do because people are scared. They still don't know enough about this.
Yeah, it's just a crazy time in general. I know here in Nashville, we're seeing our cases still go up and then we open and then we close back down. So it's like nobody really knows what to expect or what's going to happen. I think kind of the new normal is just not knowing what normal is anymore. So
yeah, I think so. I think that's about sums it up.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that I saw, because I do follow you on Instagram, the other thing that I saw is it looks like you were donating your time to first responders and like sterilizing ambulances and things like that. That's pretty awesome. Is that something that they asked you to do, or did you just call and be like, hey, we'd love to help you guys out with this? Or
yeah, I was a firefighter paramedic myself, and so I think I've always had a soft spot in my heart for that. They're out there doing things, especially now that they're not even appreciated for now. So the least that I can do is to go out there and make sure that their fire stations, ambulances, police cars, fire trucks, whatever are out there rolling around helping people, at least they're safe, because the last thing we need is all of our first responders getting sick and then they can't help the people that need it. So yeah, we've done a lot of that where I am here and I do it myself. Just there's no cost when I do it myself except for the supplies. And, it's just my way of giving back.
Yeah, well, it's, I think people a lot of the times, and I'm sure that you can relate to this, especially being someone who was in that profession for so long. And I definitely do want to talk about that. But, I know in Michigan where my family lives, my mom, someone in her condo complex had it. And then the EMT showed up and she said the best way that she could describe it is they were dressed like when the government finds ET, like they've got the full, like hazmat suits on, stuff like that. So it's I don't think unless you actually see it, you really understand the magnitude of what these people are doing every day and the risks that they're putting themselves at. So I think that's really, really cool that, especially someone like you who has so many things going on, that you can take the time and say hey, let me come and help out,
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to prioritize things. There's just some things in life that are more important than money, running your business, even family. Sometimes you put that aside to do the right thing. And I think if everyone did that, we wouldn't be where we're at today with all the chaos in our world.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, man, that's another thing too, that it's right now, everything is so divided. Politically and racial, it's just a crazy time. I think, 50 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, oh my God, we were living through one of the most volatile times in our history. So there's not really, I don't want to say not really, but it's hard to find sometimes things that you find online. You're like, oh, that's an inspirational thing, or that's something that's just somebody doing something out of the goodness of their heart. I think that's what hit me so much about it was just man, there's all this crazy stuff going on, and families are scared, and you're suiting up and helping people who help people. I think it's really commendable and admirable.
Well, I appreciate that.
No, it's no problem. And yeah, I did want to ask you, because you'd mentioned being an EMT. From what I understand, you kind of got into the extreme cleaning business and obviously Hoarders and stuff like that. But for you, if I understand correctly, it started off with you being a paramedic. Is that correct?
Yeah. So 25 years ago, when I was working on an ambulance, I wasn't on the fire department yet. I was a paramedic, and we covered some pretty bad areas of California, cities like Fontana and Rialto, and there was a lot of shootings and a lot of trauma. So we would see the aftermath of crime and trauma and suicides and things quite often. And so going into those homes, pronouncing someone dead and having to tell their family that, and then thinking on top of all this, they're gonna have to go in there and clean that up. I couldn't imagine having to do that myself. Even today, I do this for a living and I still wouldn't want to do that. We're just further traumatizing someone in an already extremely traumatizing situation. So after a really bloody, emotional one, I went home to my wife and just said, look, I don't know if there's a business model here, but I have to give these people another option, so they won't have to do that themselves. And it turned out to be a business model. I didn't know that at the time, but it just kept growing and growing and growing until, about 15 years into it, I actually was a captain on the fire department, and I decided to just leave my dream of being a fireman behind because this business and the passion that I had for it was so much better. And I thought I could help a lot more people, even save more lives than being a paramedic. That sounds kind of corny and stuff, but honestly, there was no one to help people suffering from hoarding. There was no one to really help these people. And so we found a way to do it where it wasn't just a business where you go in and say, pay me to clean up. You have to have morals and values, and you have to care about people. So any employee, any franchise owner has to say that first to me. They have to say, look, I want to get out there. I want to help people, not how much money can I make? Because that's not what it's about. Yes, we can make good money, but you have to be in it for the right reasons. And that's why our slogan is restoring homes and lives, because that's what we do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's it definitely seems like a unique venture to take on. Cause I mean, Hoarders now is in its 11th season, just started. And I've watched every episode so far, and I'm super excited that you've been in every episode. I tell my wife, I'm like, oh man, I hope Cory, whenever we would watch it, like, I hope Cory's in this episode, because he has you have a patience that I cannot comprehend. Like watching some of the families and things like that, I'm like, oh, that would be me. I'd be like, hey mom, we're just throwing this away, or dad, like you're very patient as far as being like, let's work through this and things like that. So I knew it existed, but I guess I didn't know that there was such a deep level to it. And then people like you who are out there that are like, hey, let me help you work through this. I have to ask you, man, when you came home from doing this EMT work, and you told your wife, like, hey, I'm gonna start this company, what do you think? What was that response like? Was it immediate on board, or was there questions? Or
yeah, no, I think she totally understood it, because she knows who I am too. I mean, if you're a helper, you're a helper. You can't just turn it off and on. So I think she understood it, and I think she saw there was a huge need for that, to be honest. In the mid 90s, there really wasn't anything like this that we knew of, or that we'd ever heard of. So I don't think she was that surprised at all, and I don't think she was at all unsupportive.
That's awesome. And it's good to...
I think the biggest sacrifice for her, we had to use our minivan. So I had to take the seats out of our minivan and put stuff in there that I probably shouldn't have, now that I look back on it, but I had to start somewhere. So
now, does that seem, I mean, thinking back on it now, I mean, does that seem like it was just like lifetimes ago? Because I can imagine, I mean, I've been doing this podcast now almost a year, and looking back at like the first episode compared to what we're doing now, I'm like, I don't know what that was. So, I mean, being so far, and then, get like now being a staple of a hit television show, and that coming from your good works. I mean, when you look back at it, it's like, oh man, like I don't even remember that time.
So it's weird. It's yes and no. It's like when you look back at your childhood, you think, God, that was a long time ago. But at the same time, it's like, man, that flew by.
Yeah.
So I feel both ways, which doesn't really make sense. But yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago. But yeah, it does fly by. So I feel like I could go back and do things differently, and I could go back and do things better, but I don't have any regrets. I love where I am today. I love what we've been able to do. So I couldn't ask for anything different.
That's awesome. Well, and it's one of those situations where, I agree with you. You can always go back and be like, oh, maybe I could have tackled it this way, but I think it's the mark of a modest person to be able to say like, yeah, maybe I could have done this different, or maybe, if I would have tried it this way, things would have worked out a little bit different or something like that. But to know that the decisions that you make and the way that you did do it led you to where you are now and the opportunities that you're afforded, it's like, oh, well, even if I would have done something differently, it seems like I still did it the right way.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that if I were to go back and change, it would severely alter where I am today. So I would never want to go back and change that, even the bad things, because everything's a roadmap. Just like Hoarders, I tell them the same thing. Every step along the way, this is how you got here, and this is how I got here, and I wouldn't want to change that. Not at all.
Well, I mean, the adversities and it's super cheesy, but it really is that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And if you can learn from something and come out on top and do it better the next time, I mean, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
I did want to ask you, so you'd mentioned, obviously you were a firefighter. So I think people who are listening who may watch the show and may not know, like you started as an EMT, and then in 95, you started Steri-clean. And then shortly after that, you were hired as a firefighter in California. And from what I understand, you moved through the ranks pretty quickly. You made captain pretty quickly.
Yeah, I got hired just as a firefighter. I was already a paramedic, but they wanted me to focus on just firefighting. I think within the first year, they let me start working as a paramedic. And then I think 7 years on, I promoted to captain, and they were prepping me for the next battalion chief's test. I didn't know if I really wanted to go much further because I didn't want a desk job, which is funny because now I'm sitting at a desk a lot. But at the time, I wanted to be a firefighter. I want to be out where the action is. I want to be in the building. I wanted to be saving the people. So I kind of got to the highest I wanted to go. And then, like I said, this business just got to the point where I already covered all of California, and I wanted to keep growing it. And everyone I met with said, that's not going to work. You can't be on duty, 24 hours, 10 days a month and run a nationwide company. So I just had to make that separation. It was hard. I mean, that was my second family. You put your life on the line with each other, you live together, and it was hard to just say, see you guys, I'm moving on.
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as, firefighters go, they definitely have that reputation of like, this is a brotherhood, you know what I mean? Like very similar to police officers and things like that, where it's like, hey, my life is in your hands. So like, I've got to have that relationship with you, that bond with you to be able to trust you. What I did want to ask is, looking back at it now, because I know you had said like, at that point I didn't want a desk job. Do you think any of that? I mean, we're talking, what was this, 95, like 98 time frame?
When I got hired in the fire department, it was 95.
Okay, 95. So 7 years after that.
I'm sorry. Started the business 95. I got hired in the fire department 97.
Okay. So do you think any of that was kind of, not wanting the desk job? Do you think of any of that was, kind of like the age you were at? Like, no, like I want to be in the action. Because it seems like now with having Hoarders and things like that, it's like you run the company, but then you get to go out and you still get that, like I'm living the experience, I'm hands-on helping. So do you think any of that was just like the age at the time where it's like, I'm not ready to hang up the old boots?
Yeah, I don't know. If I were to go back to the fire department today, I still wouldn't want a desk job. You're a firefighter to be a firefighter, not a paper pusher. So I just think that's how I'm wired. Even here, I don't have employees in Idaho where I am that go out and clean things. So if we happen to get a call in the small town that I'm in, which we get, usually one a week here, I still have to go out and do it. So I don't mind doing the work. I like physical. I like being outside. So I don't think it was an age thing. I think it's how I'm wired.
Well, and I was going to ask, like, were you like that growing up as well? Like, has that always just been like, it seems like somebody who, wants to be a firefighter, wants to be an EMT. It exactly like you said, it seems like you're wired a certain way because it comes with the risk that like, I'm in customer service doesn't come with. So, I mean, like, do you remember when you identified that in yourself, or is it just something you remember, forever?
I remember when I was 3 to 4, there was a firefighter that lived behind us. And that's my first remembering anything to do with fire department. My grandfather, anytime there was sirens, he would throw us in the car and go chase them, So I think I just grew up with, oh, that's exciting. You know what I mean? Hearing the stories that this guy would say, and then going and seeing car accidents or whatever the case was that my, grandpa was tooling us around in his car to go see. So I think that part of it just made that exciting. It made it interesting for me.
Yeah, I remember my dad, when I was growing up, he had a CB police scanner. So we used to just sit around and be like, "What's going on?" He listen to all the calls, and it would just sound so exciting. But yeah, I mean, and I can imagine too at that age. I mean, 3 or 4. Especially, I mean, looking at it now, like you've got stuff like Paw Patrol where, it's firefighting dogs and police officer dogs and stuff like, so like when you're at that age, it's like, oh, this is I think it's like your earliest almost definition of like, this is what a real life hero is like. So it can, make sense.
I think that one got,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think that one got canceled. Sorry.
Paw Patrol.
I think that was one of the cancel culture's first things to take off.
R.I.P. Paw Patrol.
Yes.
Yeah, man. It's
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely. That's the one thing that I really like about you and your show is that it seems like it almost feels like it's safe from that, because it's like, how can you ever want to go after something that's just like, hey, I just want to help you be able to live in your home and get the
people do.
Really?
Yeah. Well, they say, we're exploiting people with, mental disabilities and stuff. I think it's quite the opposite. I think before we even did this show, no one knew what hoarding was.
Yeah.
Honestly, no one did. We knew that it was everywhere and just how prevalent it was in our country and in the world. So I think it brought a lot of exposure to a problem that was pretty well unknown. And a lot of people that thought they were the only ones living that way, or their family member was the only ones living that way, they realized, oh my gosh, there's people just like us everywhere.
Well, yeah, because I mean, from what I understand, the credits, it's like it's something that 19 million Americans struggle with in some shape or form.
1 in 20 people. So when you look at 5% of the population in a country that has 330 million, that's a lot of people. So
it's insane.
Yeah, society makes it so much easier though. When you think about, credit cards, online shopping, HSN on TV, we can just click on our TV and buy something. We have salesmen telling them we can't live without this. We have flea markets, garage sales, 99-cent stores. I think I already said that, but it's just everywhere we look. Things are cheap, affordable, disposable, So I think if you look at like the 50s, yes, there was people hoarding, but it just wasn't as easy. That's all. Now it's very simple. And I think there's a lot more trauma in society now, a lot of things that cause depression and all these triggers that you hear these poor people talk about at the beginning. I think that's why we're seeing it just explode like this.
Yeah, my grandfather was actually, I wouldn't say that he was a hoarder, but I think that he was a guy that was a sucker for this deal's too good to pass up. He passed away a little over a year ago, and I know my mom went down there to Florida to help my grandma, and they were finding like iPads and tablets that he had bought on TV, or they go through his drawers, and I bought this just like you said, Home Shopping Network, or you know what I mean. And then you're like, where and when did you get all this, and how long has it just been sitting here? And it was just like they had like 3 timeshares, because he would be like, oh, well, it's too good of a deal to pass up. I'd love to go to Eugene, Oregon for 4 days a year. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we actually. Let me ask you this, because I know that you had mentioned, the trauma and things like that. I mean, when you started, I can imagine that you weren't like, oh, I'm going to go in and be a, almost like a therapist, because a lot of watching the show is you. Like I just watched the episode with Miss Althea that it just came out, and like she's living in a huge home and saw value because she paid, like that. I'm sure you remember, but like that Ford Ranger, to her it was like, this is a $500 truck, but everything was locked up on it. The rims were bent, stuff like that. So like what was that like for you, kind of moving into that role, being like, oh, like I'm not just here to clean things. I'm here to like, I have to emotionally like support this person through the process.
Yeah, I think it was a learning experience. But again, being the kind of personality that I am, like, I like to help people. So I don't sit there and just get mad at them and judge them. And I listen, I understand where they're coming from. And even on the show now, they don't really show this, but usually for the first hour, I'll go in just with myself and the person that's suffering from the hoarding, working alongside them. I want to see how they think. I really do. I want to see what kind of decisions they make. So that I know how to kind of help them or what not to do or say. It's that learning. And so that's what anyone that goes into a house like this needs to do. So from the beginning, that was to me, Natalie. I know, it was an accident. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Anything, that I can learn, I'm going to, because they're difficult. They're complicated. I'll say there's a lot of layers to hoarding. So in the beginning, I was fascinated, not just by the stuff, but by these characters, as you see on the show. They're full of a lot. A lot of them are brilliant minds. And so you hear everything they've been through in their life, and it's just like, oh, my mind is blown. What do you mean you were a NASA engineer and you built a space shuttle, and how are you living like this? So sometimes you're just enamored by these people, and it makes you want to help them even more because, God, you've done so much with your life. I don't want to see you living, your retirement years like this. It's not fair to you. So there's a lot to learn, but from 25 years working in homes 8 hours a day with these people, you do learn a lot.
Oh, for sure. And, that's one of the things that kind of has blown me away because, the show came on when I was younger. And so, I would watch it occasionally with like my parents or with my mom, stuff like that. And then I got older, and something about, I think maybe like something about being older and then really diving into it. I think I was just more like mentally prepared to like sit and invest in it. And you're 100% correct. Like some of these people, like I've noticed there's a lot of educators. There was, you weren't on the episode, but there was a gentleman and his wife who hoarded like millions of books, like their entire home in Chicago. It was like a 3-story home. Yeah. Just like just books upon book. And, he had a very, like, you just have such a passion for like, I want to read, I want to learn. And then that takes over your entire environment. Like it's, I don't know. And I think it's interesting too. Like you said, like it's almost, my wife is a social worker. So when we watch the show, she's like, oh yeah, this person has definitely had some trauma, you know what I mean? And so it's crazy to kind of see that something could happen to you, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And those effects are still prevalent, well into your adult years and causing you to kind of live in a way that it's almost like you're using it as a way to just shut the outside world. Cause there's so many cases where people are like, oh, I haven't been to my mom's house in like 20 years. I had no idea she was living like this. I wanted to ask in all the years that, well, and before I ask that, so from what I understand, the show started because A&E was like, hey, we want to follow you around doing what you do. Can you talk a little bit about like, how did that come about? I know it was years ago, but what was that experience like?
Yeah. So it was either late 2008, early 2009. And the production company at the time was Screaming Flea Productions. And they came to us and said, hey, look, we want to do a reality show on crime scene cleanup. And we said, well, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, but we've already tried it with a couple other networks, Discovery, Fremantle Media, and it just never goes anywhere. But, if you want to try, sure. So they came to 2 different houses where people had passed away, and one happened to be a hoarder. So they filmed just a 7-minute, edited, it was 7 minutes, just called a sizzle. And they showed it to A&E, and A&E said, you're right, that was a little too graphic. But what is up with that house? And so we said, well, that's a hoarder. They said, is that common? We said, it's very common. It is everywhere. And they said, well, gosh, that could be a show. So we did a pilot with them called Dirty Work. And it was just my wife and I and our crews. And we went to 2 different hoarders' houses. And they got to see, these quirky personalities. One of them was, her nickname in the 70s was Disco Bonnie. Like she was known as the disco queen in like roller rinks and stuff. So a lot of her memorabilia and her stardom, if you'll call it that, was on her walls mixed in with her hoard. So they were fascinated by it, like we all are. And at the time, their top show was Intervention. And they said, well, what if we brought a doctor in kind of like we do on intervention, and explored that psychology while you guys cleaned the house. We said, super, and so it was really an accident that, formed the Hoarders show. And then season 3, they had their record-breaking audience of 3.5 million, which has been beat by now. But, it was pretty awesome to be a part of something like that was really not even, planned.
Yeah, it's just so it's so crazy because the whole series is on demand, and it's on Amazon Prime, and we finished season 10, and I was like, man, like, I don't know if there's going to be it, because I know Matt Paxton left the show, and I was like, I don't know if there's going to be a season 11. And then I got the alert that season 11 was coming out, and I told my wife, I was like, clear your calendar. This is what we're doing. And we have she's just under 2, so most of our shows are when she gets home from work, because we can't, by 10 o'clock at night, we're like, well, I just want to go to sleep.
Yeah,
so, but I was just so excited that it was coming back. Let me ask you this, like you said, it started off as crime scene. I can agree with you. I think, especially back then, like, I don't know how it would do now, but like 2008, 2009, it seems like that would be pretty graphic to be like, hey, something terrible happened here. Let's just go in and rip out all this carpet and everything like that. But when they picked it up as the hoarding show and they paired you with the doctor, like, what was your initial thought, being like, okay, because was it someone who was already an expert in that field, or was it like, they were a doctor, but they're kind of learning about this at the same time that you are, I guess is my question.
Well, it's a little different. I wasn't even on the first 2 seasons. Like, the first season was just a doctor, if I recall. Season 2, they started to bring in some people to help clean it. I wasn't a part of it, which actually I was upset about, because here I gave them this great idea. and
it's my work.
So, but a lot of the doctors have changed too, since its first inception. But, Dr. Zazio, Dr. Tompkins, Tolan, Dr. Green, most of them deal with OCD and things like that. Some of them do specialize in hoarding as well. There's no doctor that's just a hoarding doctor.
Right.
So they all specialize in mostly OCD and things along those lines, ADD, ADHD, whatever. But hoarding is a, like I said, again, it's multiple layers. So there's usually 6, 7 underlying things causing it. A lot of doctors don't like working with them because they are so complicated, and they're difficult to work with. So I think the doctors that we have are fantastic. I think they're so different from one another. You work with Dr. Tompkins, is probably the nicest guy I've ever met in my life.
Oh, again, one of those people who's just had an incredible patience. It's like, I'm so envious of people like you and him, that you're just like, just take all the time that you need. I'm like, figure it out.
Yeah, no, he really is. We call him the gentle giant because that's just who he is in real life. I mean, he is the nicest person. Dr. Zazio, she has her own style, and she can connect with patients. They're just all, I like working with different ones because it puts a little bit more or less on me even, because we have to do things different depending on what they can do or what their strengths are. So it's kind of interesting going from one to the next with these different doctors. But yeah, it's been fun watching the show actually grow and change a little bit.
Yeah, it's been very cool too, because it feels like, the idea itself was very conceptual. Nobody had done anything like it. Like you said, like, it was, intervention was kind of the same way, where it was, hey, nobody's showing something like this on TV. So it was an idea that kind of stood out on its own. But then to see this idea actually like grow, and then it's almost like it found its key players as it went along, like your Dr. Tompkins, your Dr. Zazio, Matt for a really long time, like just people that you were like, oh, okay, this core group of people is what makes this show so compelling, because you can, again, I think it all just comes down to, like, you can tell that there's a genuine sense of, I just want to help these people live a better life,
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me ask you this, because I know, like, for me, and I've told you, like, whenever we go back and we watch all the old episodes all the time. just, with having a 2-year-old, there's not a lot of stuff that you can just put on and watch and be like, I'm super.
And Hoarders is what you choose.
Well, we're trying to teach her early. So, but there's no like, it's not like no one's shooting each other or, cursing super bad. There's sometimes where I've noticed that you say holy crap a lot. And I'm like, man, he's like, again, so much more pick. Cause I'm like, get this. But, for me and my wife, we have episodes that stick out where we're just like, it almost like sizzles into your brain and you carry it with you. Are there any people that you've helped or cases that stick out to you over all the years that you're like, oh, this is one that like it was exceptionally crazy, or like anything that you is kind of just so far different than, I mean, I guess they're all intense, but like, is there anything that really sticks out to you as like, this was a bad one?
There's so many on there that are bad, but I mean, the first one that always comes to my mind is Al, because I've gone there 3 times now for the show, and just watching him change. So we went there the first time and really struggled. It was in season 3, I believe, because it was one of the first ones I think it was the second shoot I did with Dr. Zazio, and Al was climbing in the dumpster. He looked like Jesus, if you remember, throwing stuff out, cussing it out. I mean, there was more bleeps in that episode to cover his, language, but and we didn't get a lot done, unfortunately. We came back and his son was already taken away. That was the really sad part. And I hate when parents, and I hate to say, pick stuff over their kids, but on the surface, that's what it looks like. Obviously, we know it's a lot deeper than that. So knowing that we didn't clean it enough when the code enforcement officer came back to get his son back, and he said, sorry, Al, we're going to court. You hate that, because that's not a win for anybody. And then when you come back a year later, he still doesn't have his son, and the place is filled up again. And you're going, gosh, what is this guy not seeing? And the things he says are just like, did you really just say that?
Yeah.
And then we go back a third time because we hear he got his son back. And I was like, no, he didn't. No way. So I was blown away when we went back there a third time and his son was back and he was well dressed and he had a calendar on his fridge with all of his son's events. And it's like, what in the hell happened to you? Where did this Al come from? So that's why I like that one, because it was so difficult and so unbelievable that he did this work. And the reason he did it, the code enforcement officer and he ended up bonding and becoming friends, and the code enforcement officer got cancer. So on the final episode, he was there, but couldn't even walk around his house because he was so sick. Mm-hmm. And he ended up dying right after we filmed that. And so for Al to say, look, I'm doing all this for him, that's pretty amazing for someone that was responsible for taking your kid away.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's crazy too, because, with my wife she works at a place that specializes in drug addiction, but the parallels are so incredibly similar. Like, you see kids being taken away because, they're exactly, again, you hate to say it that way, but like you're choosing drugs over your kid and you're not, and then it just takes that. I think that's the best part, where it just takes that one thing that changes that whole perspective. And I think, it gives you hope to be like, just because this is your situation now doesn't mean this is going to be your situation forever,
And I wish everyone watching would understand that, we don't have the magic answer, the cure for these people that we're working with on the show. It has, just like drug addiction, just like alcohol, just like anything, they have to want it. At the end of the day, they have to want it. We can bring all the tools and great advice and dump trucks and crap we want, but at the end of the day, until they're ready to do the difficult work, just like an addiction, it's hard. And it's hard for a hoarder, especially one that's been doing it for 20, 30 years. It's all they know anymore. It's an identity. And so to take everything away from them, including their identity, that's like me coming to you and taking away everything out of your house, stripping you, saying you have no more career, and then to say, you're welcome. Like, what do you mean? I have nothing. I'm left with nothing. So I think people get so frustrated that people don't just change like that. That's impossible for us to ask. All we can do is plant that seed, give them hope, give them the tools, the resources, the things they need to change, so that when they truly are ready, or if this does spark a little like, that one clean room is pretty nice, I might keep going. That's all I can hope for.
And it's crazy too, because like you see it on their faces. So like, for example, the most recent episode, Becky, who had, her house, and then she had the, I mean, Jesus Christ, she had that entire motel. And I was like, watching it, because there is a running theme in the show where it's like, well, maybe we'll get it done, maybe we won't. And I was watching that one and I was like, there's no way that they're going to get this done. And then you guys pulled it out at the end. But like watching her the whole episode, she's so like, you're doing all the stuff. She's obviously fighting it and then regressing and talking about, things with her ex-husband, stuff like that. But then at the end, you bring her into this house. There's a new refrigerator. There's new carpet. She's got a place for her grandkids to stay. And in that moment, because throughout the episode, you're asking her like, hey, we got all this cleaned out. How do you feel? And she's like, feels good. I wanted to keep this or that, and then you bring her in and she's like, oh, this is awesome. And in that moment, you can see on their face, and even if it's brief, because I mean, from what I understand with Becky, watching the end, she's kind of resorted back into the same thing. She's, but in that one moment, it's like you almost get a glimpse of what your life could be. So how does it feel for you when they take that glimpse and they run with it? Because there's so many stories of like, yeah, we did this, we set them up with aftercare funds, and then 6 months later, it's right back to how it was. So, what's that feeling like when you're like, you got it,
Right. I think the happiest feeling for me on any of the episodes, and I don't think it ever even made the final cut. Maybe it did. I believe it was in New York. I believe I don't remember. She stole a bunch of stuff, and that was kind of like, what? You're a thief and you're a hoarder. Like, we do see those once in a while.
I remember I did see an episode. She was like a shoplifter and just had a bunch of stolen stuff in her house.
I think it was her, but it's happened off the show a few times where an elderly person will run and jump on a bed because they're so excited because they haven't had a bed in a long time. I mean, there's no better feeling than that. I'm sorry, but they've been sleeping on piles of stuff or in their car, curled up in a ball on a little piece of a couch. And so to see them not only smile, which is asking a lot sometimes, but to see them smile, cry, and run and jump on a bed like a little kid because they haven't had a bed in so long, like that makes it all worth it. I don't care how much we fought during the last week. That makes it worth it because I know deep down inside they're happy. Is it enough? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's really, again, I think you're kind of giving them a glimpse of what their life could be. And I also think it's awesome that you guys set them up with aftercare, because I think that's the one part of it. I think that's the one thing that I think would frustrate me if you didn't do that. Would be like, hey, we came in, we did all this for you. Now just go ahead and figure out how to live on your own. But you guys go the extra mile and, hey, here's aftercare. Here's making sure that you can continue on this path. So I mean, let me ask you this. I mean, how long, and maybe this is, you haven't even thought about it, but like, how long can you see yourself doing that? I mean, could you see yourself Hoarders season 20,
I don't know. I mean, I'll probably do it as long as it's around. We're still filming right now, even through COVID. We started up again. So I'm afraid that when they show these episodes, COVID might be over. And so I think there's going to be a disconnect in people watching it with everyone wearing masks for a whole season. That might plummet our ratings. That's just me thinking that. A lot of shows we wear masks and stuff just because it's dangerous, but I think there's just this cult following to this show. People love the show. During the whole quarantine thing, it was in the top 3 of all the downloaded shows on Netflix. I mean, that's unreal.
And there's only 1 season on Netflix. It's just season 10.
There should be more than that. There's a bunch.
I'll have to look, because when I went and watched it, I think season 10 maybe it's changed, but at the time it was only season 10. And I was like, well, sweet, I just watched 1 through 9. So let me jump in on this.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it was in the top 3. I mean, that is huge. It really is. So I don't know if and when this thing's going to end. It's been canceled before, and it keeps coming back.
I know, and it's crazy too, the way, like, I think, especially for a show like yours, is that there's a whole generation of people, and I think it's very similar to shows like The Office and Friends. Like, there's a whole generation of people who were probably too young for it when it started. Mm-hmm. And then now they're older, like, college or getting out of college, having kids, whatever. I mean, I'm 35 and I remember when it, first came out, like I was in a band touring and stuff. So I just didn't watch a lot of TV. And then I got, older and I really connected with it. And so I really think that might be something that kind of continues to carry it, is just this whole new generation of being like, I just wonder, like, if you're going to be in a mall someday and some 14-year-old's going to be like, Cory Chalmers, I watched you on Netflix.
Yeah, that just happened. We went to we're in a really small town in Sun Valley, Idaho. There's only 20,000 people in the whole county, but I went down to Twin Falls to shop, and for whatever reason, I wore my Hoarders t-shirt, and I'll never do that again. But there were some young kids. I was surprised. I was really surprised.
Do you ever had people like stop you and be like, hey, so like this is the situation, like what should I do to help? Or like, can you come look at, I mean, do you get a lot of like advice on the spot questions?
Not as much as people. What I get a lot of is like, gosh, where do I know you from? Because I'm not like some big actor. So it's just in the back of their mind. They recognize me, but they don't know where it's from. So they're always like, and I see it on their face before they even say anything. And I'll usually just say Hoarders. They'll be like, how do you know?
I was at cousin Janet's birthday. We've met several times. I'd see you're much nicer than me. I would just mess with them. Yeah. So, but yeah, man, it's just, I don't know. It's like I said, I think you're right. There is 100% cult following to the show. And I think even outside of that, there's some shows like, Mystery Science Theater, that it's been off the air forever, but people are still like, let me rewatch all these old episodes. You know what I mean? And so I think your show is going to have that. I think your show is going to kind of have that legacy to it as it continues. And even when it's gone, I think it's going to be one of those ones that people are like, where can I stream this, or where can I download it and kind of relive? Let me ask you this. I mean, is there with COVID and with you guys having like the same kind of formula? Well, let me ask you, because it seems like before you used to break it up where it was like you did two cases at once, and now you're like taking the show and you're doing one person and devoting the entire episode to that person. What is the benefit of that to you? I mean, do you prefer it like, let's just focus on this one person the whole process, or do you have a preference?
Yeah, I like it. I don't know if 1 hour versus these 2 hour episodes, if there's a benefit to either one, but I think when you looked at two people in 1 hour, was really only 22 minutes of airtime. And that is a lot to squeeze in. It's a lot for the editors to figure out how the heck do I squeeze in a whole week of filming from 2 or 3 different cameras into 22 minutes. I mean, it's crazy when you think about that. So now they have 88 minutes for one show, which is a lot. From what I see on the feedback, I would say 90+% of the people do like it. It just gives us more time to really get into the person's background. The first, act one, we'll say, is just really a lot about the hoarder, what they've been through and kind of explaining how they got there. And I think, just like I said earlier, that roadmap is really important. So people might understand the person a little bit better when they hear all that they've been through. So I like it. And
I agree with you. That's the one thing is, because most of these people, I mean, again, I think Althea is a perfect example of this, but like these people have gone through trauma that a lot of people would never understand. Like her husband the crazy thing to me, I remember from that episode, is he would go in and like to a consignment store and just be like, hey, I'm buying everything. And they'd come over the speaker and be like, yeah, please put down everything you're buying. Some gentleman has just bought the whole store. And so this is like what she's used to. And then he passes away and she's like, you've left me with all this. Like, why did you leave? And she's like screaming that out. Like, why did you leave me with all of this? Mm-hmm. So, I really think that it gives the opportunity to kind of show that, like, I don't know, man, your mental health is really important, and so it's like, if you're not taking care of it, this is what can happen, Yeah.
And I think it also shows people look through life, because we're not working with 20-year-olds. We're working with people typically 50 and above. It just shows, take care of yourself in those years. And if you do have traumas, triggers of some kind, don't put those in a vault, because we know the vault doesn't work. Right. That only stays shut for so long.
Yeah. And it's almost like the hoarding analogy works there too. It's like, even if you are putting stuff in a vault, there's only so much room that's going to hold, and you're going to have to, dig through it anyway, like I don't know, man. I told my wife we were watching yesterday, and I was like, I just can't imagine like having to climb over like a pile of trash to like get to like, it's almost like a nest. You know what I mean? Like they'll make a nest and crash out in this like little tiny living area that they've created for themselves.
I know. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. People think they're lazy. They're not lazy. They just brought, 50 tons of stuff to their house. That's not lazy. And then doing the simplest of tasks like cooking a meal. That's why those couple seasons, 6, 7, 5, 6, whatever it was, we spent the night there to see what it's actually like to live in that house and live like that. It kind of it turned into more like, oh, this is gross. But I'm the one that suggested it. And I suggested it because everyone knows it's hard for them to throw things away. So if they wanted to add another dynamic, and I said, look, let's see what it's like to actually live like that. Then we can get into throwing things away, but let's experience life living in a hoarder house. And sometimes I could do it. Sometimes I checked out. I threw in the towel and I went and stayed at a hotel.
But yeah, it was an episode that Matt was on, but the gentleman, his father was a former Nazi. I'm trying to remember what his name was. He was a beast of a man. But I remember like Matt, like he was like, all right, I'm going to like basically, show you where my nest is. And he had no air conditioning and they're in South Carolina and it's like, 100 degrees at night. And I was just like, my wife looked at me and she said, I don't care, TV show or not, there's no amount of money that you could pay me to see. I mean, that's a bravery, man. It's a bravery to be like, let me show you what these people are going through. And I don't know, you're a better man than me. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it was a little different.
So I wanted to ask you this. I mean, is there anybody on the show, I mean, as far as like the doctors, anything like that you get along with really well, or like you look forward to doing an episode with? Is there anybody that you're like, oh, like anytime pair me with, Dr. Tompkins or Dr. Sazio or
any of them? I mean, honestly, I've worked the most probably with Dr. Sazio. We're friends, even off the show. But I love working with Dr. Tompkins again, like, cause they're so different. It's fun to say, oh, I'm working with Dr. Green this episode. Cool. I get to work with eyelashes.
I love Dr. Green.
Yeah. So, they're all unique and different. There's no doctors that I'm like, oh, not that doctor. You know what I mean? They're all good people. And I think that's why they're doing it. So simple answer is no, I don't have any preference.
Awesome. Yeah. My wife is very partial to Dr. Suzanne Chabot.
I know.
My daughter, I mean, she's built like me, so she's just short and round. So she calls her little Chabot. She just runs around the house. So
we miss Dr. Chabot. I wish she was back, but she can't. So it's too bad. She was a sweet lady.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure like that's another thing too, is that like I don't think people understand the mental dexterity that you have to do what you do. You know what I mean? Because I mean, you're setting yourself up where there's a 90% chance you're going to do all this work, and then it's going to be for nothing for that 10% chance that maybe a life's going to turn around, something like that. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's frustrating. People ask me if I love doing it, and I say no, I really don't. Because we get dropped into these, places that we really don't know anything about besides, they sent us pictures. Mm-hmm. Where in real life we go and we do assessments, we make plans, we do all this stuff before cleanup day, but these are hard. And then they're difficult people. They haven't really had any preparation for this. There's usually a crisis, so they have to clean it or this is going to happen. So there's pressure on us for that. And it's just not normal life. It's not made up. It's not scripted. It's not anything, but it's just way more difficult than a job I would go do tomorrow here in Idaho. So it's not fun by any means. So when it is a rewarding one, then I love it.
Now, if it's not fun for you to do, mm-hmm. is it like a greater calling as far as, even though it's not fun, like this is what I should be doing, or like the reward of when it does work is why I should be doing it? Because I think too now, and the reason I want to ask you this is, I'm a millennial, but I'm like at the very end. You know what I mean? Like we had AOL, we had landline phones, stuff like that. And my wife and I, there's a 7-year difference. And what I've noticed is that a lot of, kids in their 20s now and stuff like that, a lot of what it is like, oh, I need to love what I do. Like, I can't have a job if I don't like just have this, you know, and I'm someone that's like, I worked in a factory forever because like, I love paying my bills. You know what I mean?
They all got trophies. I know who you're talking about.
So, I mean, is it one of those things where it's like, I do this job because when it's rewarding, it's worth it, and it's worth kind of taking all the beatings for it?
Yeah, I think it's everything that you said. You know, I think it's the right thing to do because it continues to show people that there are people out there suffering from this still. And some of them are really good people, you know, so I think it's still educating the public. Every night we show someone new, bringing more awareness to the disorder. I think it's very rewarding still, you know. At the end of even Becky, hey, I left and she had a brand new house. It's up to her what she does with it. But the rewarding part was she was willing to let go of everything at the end of the day and only save a little bit of stuff. So I still consider that a success. She chose not to follow it 100%. That's fine. You know, I'm sorry, but hopefully she was, you know, hopefully she will be able to sell off that investment property to an investor, that motel, who can do something with it. And she wouldn't have been able to really do that as well if we didn't clean it out first. So I always look at the positive of things that we are able to get done. I can't force them to change the rest of their lives, and ongoing, I can't. I have no control over that. All I can do is what we can do when we're there, and I think we're good at it. So that's why I agree. I do it.
I think you're damn good at it. And one other thing that I wanted to ask you, because I've kind of noticed this as well, and I think it's a common thread through all of the episodes that you watch, and I was wondering if you've come to expect it now, but it seems like when you go to someone, they're like, I want my life to be better. I want all this stuff gone. I want I want a new life for myself. I want to be able to have my family over. And that lasts for maybe 20 minutes of like the first day. And then it's like, gets to the point where it's like, you know, sometimes it's get off my property, everybody leave, get your camera out of my face, stuff like that. So like, how do you prepare yourself? Because it's almost, I mean, if I know it's going to happen, you know it's going to happen. I mean, I'm just somebody watching. I'm not living it. So like, what is that mental preparation, or is it different for each person as far as like, this is how we're going to tackle it? Or do you seem to have like a blanket approach to it?
No, but we've heard all the excuses, and I'll call them excuses because they are. Whether it's, oh, this is worth this much and I want to get the money for it. I've done it twice. Here, I'll write you a check for it right now. How much is your whole hoard worth? I'll write you a check. And they always chicken out. So we know all the excuses and we know how to come back at them. At the end of the day, it's difficult self-work. So, and that's what they hate. They hate all the stopping and talking, but that's why the doctor's there. We have to get to the root of the problem that's causing this. Otherwise, if we clean out the whole house and don't do any work on changing the behavior, what are we doing? It's no different than walking into a bar, taking a bottle from an alcoholic and saying, you're welcome, I just cured you.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Go home and be a good dad.
Right. Like, we can't take the signs and symptoms away of this, you know, disorder and not work up here, because this is where it's all gone awry. And so we know it's going to happen. We just filmed one where the guy said, oh, I can't wait to have all this stuff gone. Tomorrow can't come fast enough. And I'm just going, right. He's like, no, I'm serious. I'm going to let it all go. We hardly got anything done. So it doesn't matter what they say or think. As soon as you start touching their things, opening up those old wounds, all of it comes out. And if you really do let go of everything, you're just detached. And we know that too. So sometimes you'll see people saying, okay, just let it all go. We're like, no.
Yeah, like, so you still need to look. Yeah. This isn't about what I want. This is about making sure that, you know, you understand why we're, and it's got to be crazy too. And my wife said this, but it's like, you guys are there for what, 4 or 5 days max when you do a shoot?
The cleanup is 4 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're there for 4 days roughly. And in that time, you're trying to tackle like years worth of abuse, or not abuse, I'm sorry, but like years worth of trauma and these underlying mental health issues. You're trying to do that at the same time that you're trying to clear a home out. So it's like, you know, we stop and then we work and we talk, and like my wife was like, I couldn't do it. Like, it just seems like it's so much all in one. And yet somehow you guys are able to, and I don't know if it's maybe, you know, the pairing of, you know, someone like you and a doctor and then having the family there so you can all kind of knock it out at once. But she's like, there's no way that emotionally she could handle that. So I think it's kind of crazy that, you know, you guys are in the cases that it works, you guys are able to make that much movement with a person in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. So it's really difficult on the show because there is so much starting and stopping that the cleanup is always kind of on the back burner because, you know, they're having these meetings, they're talking about all the issues with the family. And so our crews aren't used to standing around. You know, they're just not. They're used to just, oh, here's a hoard. Okay, let's go through everything. Let's sort it. Let's make categories. Let's do this. So it's really hard because that makes noise. And so the camera people are always like, oh, be quiet, you guys. We got to get this scene. So when they do say, okay, go ahead, we got to move really fast to get as much done as we do on that show. It's really not easy, especially like the one you just saw, Becky. I mean, we had, I think, total of like 14 motel rooms, 2 houses. It was insane. But when they said go, it's like you move as fast as you can and just get that stuff done. So
well, it's crazy. You see people with like snow shovels and like put this all on a tarp and then just drag the tarp out, you know, like dump it. I think it's crazy too. It's like you guys have pointed out before, but like, you know, maybe you work for 8 hours in a day, but you've got, you know, 15 people working. So that's, you know, 15 people doing 8 hours worth of work. Like it adds up really, really, really quickly. And it's just, I don't know. It's amazing how much, again, when it works, it's amazing how much you guys can get done. How much you can get done with having just that short amount of time.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll wrap it up. I did want to do something kind of fun with you since you are here. So I wanted to do a new segment on the show called Round One Fight. And right here, we're going to put in a little graphic. This is on YouTube. It's brand new. So I'm going to name a couple of people, and I'm going to ask you, and let me give you the context. So the context is charity boxing match, right? So you're boxing this person, but all the money is going to go to charity. Who do you think would win? So the first one I'm going to ask you, Cory Chalmers versus Mr. Clean if he was a real person. So who do you think?
I don't know if he's much of a boxer, but I'll say Mr. Clean. He's a big guy.
He's got that dangling earring.
I have a picture with him.
Do you really?
I have a picture of him. Yeah, we went to a cleaning conference last year, and Mr. Clean was actually there, so I got to take a picture with him. When we both went, and mine was nothing.
He's like, "What's up?"
I flex, and I'm like, "Oh, that's not very big next to you."
I imagine he kind of looks like one of the old like vaudevillian barbell guys, you know, dumbbell guys with the curly mustache. All right, second one. Again, charity boxing match. Cory Chalmers, Matt Paxton. And the reason I'm asking,
Matt already said I could take him, so don't worry.
Well, I was gonna say because Matt is short, but he's scrappy. But you're tall, and are you over 6 feet? Because on TV, like I'm look
6 feet.
Okay, because and on TV, it's hard to tell like most of the time if somebody's tall or not. But like you're one of those guys who's like, oh yeah, he's tall. So I was like, Matt's short and scrappy, but Cory's got the reach. I think if you can keep him away, you're good.
There you go.
Okay, last one, and this one's for my wife. Cory Chalmers versus Dr. Suzanne Chabaud. Who takes it?
She would kick my ass.
Sweep the leg?
Yes. Or I would let her win, but I'm not going to beat up poor Miss Chabaud. No way.
And then I imagine she would sweep the leg and then say, I'm going to Steri-clean the mat with you. That'd be her trash talk.
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate it. And again, just something kind of fun. It's some of the stuff my wife and I talk about. It's like, I wonder who would take who in this situation. But
Dr. Chabaud would just talk me out of it. That's what she did. Yeah. She's so good.
Well, I feel like that's what Dr. Zazio would do too. She would just be like dodging and being like, why do you want to do this? What is going on?
Yeah, probably so.
Well, I know you're a very busy person. Like I say, you're running your own company. You got everything with the TV show. I just wanted to again say thank you so much for coming in and hanging out, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. It's season 20 or season. I'm talking about Hoarders. This is episode 27. Hoarders is on A&E Monday nights. Season 11 has started. You can go in, catch up on demand. Even if you're watching it the next day, like watch it. Again, one of the best shows on TV. It's a staple in our household. And Cory, again, just thank you so much for being here, man.